Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Luna Display and FreshBooks. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hey, John. How are you? I'm
doing all right. We had so much fun doing a Shortcuts episode last week that we're going to dive in for part 2 because, I'll tell you, one of the things is I've used Shortcuts for a long time, but a lot of the ones I used, a lot of the ones I talked about last week were ones that you developed originally or I modified from things that you had done. But I spent a day earlier, I don't know, about a week ago, just messing around with Shortcuts and Mac automation and a bunch of different things. And I came up with some new ones that I thought I'd talk about. And then I know you've got a bunch of other ones that you've been using that you want to talk about too.
Interesting. Okay, go ahead and tell me about the new shortcuts that you made.
Okay, so I started out with web APIs because I had not really done a lot of shortcuts with web APIs before. And so I wanted to start out with something simple. And this is one that I wanted to share because I think you may not have the same need for this type of information as I do, but it's a good, simple way to get started. And so as a little bit of background, I actually, when I pay for my electricity for my house, I pay the hourly price. And that's like a special program that our local utility has that is designed to encourage people to shift their use to times when electricity costs less. Because when it costs a lot, that's when there's high demand. And so to spread out the burden on the infrastructure, they do this and it encourages you to do things like run your dishwasher at night when electricity tends to be cheap, or your laundry, or whatever it is. So I've been doing that for about 5 years, and it saved me like $1,500 over 5 years. So it's a pretty good program. But the one thing that's a pain, it's hard to know what the electricity price is at any one time. It spikes for funny reasons. It may be that it's super cold and new plants have to go online that are burning coal, and it's more expensive than doing some other kind of generation of power. So they have a web API, and I thought, what would be kind of cool is if I did a shortcut that I could just ask Siri what the price of electricity is and find out. So if I'm thinking, hey, I'm going to go run some laundry or something, I can ask Siri what the price of electricity is, and then I'll know whether it's a good time to do it or not. So the reason this is a good starter type of shortcut for web APIs is that it's just an open public web API. You don't have to do any OAuth or any kind of logging into the system. All you're doing is sending a request and getting back very simple data. The data you get back is JSON formatted, and it's the time and the price in cents in US currency. So there's not like this deep tree of data that you have to navigate to find the piece of information you're looking for. And you just do a GET request in Shortcuts, and it returns it. So that was a place I started because I felt like it was a good way to get my feet wet. I did run into one kind of weird little, I think it was a bug in the API or something. It was returning RTF text to me for some reason. And I couldn't understand it. I think I texted you at one point, but you weren't around. But by the time I figured it out after a while, but for some reason it was returning this rich text and it was breaking the shortcut. And then I realized what was going on and was able to convert that, and it all worked fine. But it's a good place to start. If you can find, whether it's this API, and I can put a link to it in the show notes, or just any that are public that don't have a lot of hoops you have to jump through in order to make them work, that's a good way to get your feet wet in trying it.
That's a good one. I wonder if any of my energy providers has a similar webpage where I can actually check these stats. That would be fascinating.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by our friends at Luna Display. Have you ever looked at your iPad and wished you could use it as a second display for your Mac? Luna Display lets you do just that. And it makes sense, right? Your iPad already has a gorgeous display, and you can always use some more screen space when you're working from your Mac, right? I like to use Luna Display right to the side of my main display for my Mac. I put things like Slack or messages in there, and when I'm working full screen in Logic or something like that on my big display, I still can see the messages as they come in. Luna Display provides crystal clear image quality, reliable performance, and wireless flexibility. You just pop in this little piece of hardware into your Mac and you're good to go. And if you don't have access to Wi-Fi, there's no problem at all. You can just connect with USB. When using Luna Display, you can set up your workspace anywhere so you can be productive at the office, in the studio, or on the go. You get more screen real estate without the expense of buying a new screen. Luna Display also acts as a complete extension of your Mac. It supports your external keyboard as well as your Apple Pencil, plus touch interactions, so you can interact with your Mac with a swipe of your finger. I love the Luna Display because it provides me freedom to get away from my desk. I may be working on something on my Mac already, but now I can just pick up my iPad and move around the house, and even sit outside where I have Wi-Fi too, still using my Mac from my iPad. Also, Luna Display is amazingly portable. It's this little nubbin that plugs into your Mac via USB or mini display port. Just run an app on your Mac and your iPad to connect the two, and you're all set. The whole thing feels like magic. I really love it. Listeners of App Stories can get an exclusive 10% discount on the Luna Display. Just go to lunadisplay.com and enter the promo code App Stories at checkout. Again, that's lunadisplay.com, and the promo code is App Stories to get 10% off the Luna Display. Our thanks to Luna Display for supporting the show.
So I told you last week that I was in the process of reorganizing my shortcuts widget based on shortcut launchers for other shortcuts. And I shared some examples of my work launcher, my health launcher. All of these launchers are actually shortcuts that are based on a single choose from menu action. And each option of the menu launches a different shortcut. I've now done the same for the action extension. So I've reorganized my shortcuts that I see when I tap on the shortcuts extension in the share sheet. All of the individual shortcuts that I see in there are now grouped in 4 different collections. Now, I'm doing this for 2 reasons. One of them is I like to have sort of a most used approach to the share sheet. So that, for example, I have a group that is just called extensions, and that is my top group that contains all of the shortcuts that I tend to run from Drafts or from Safari or from Tweetbot. And then I have dedicated groups for specific functions.
Okay.
For example, I have a photo extensions group that contains all of my shortcuts to upload images, to combine screenshots together, to frame iPhone screenshots. So all image stuff is collected in the same group. I have a JavaScript extensions group that contains all of my JavaScript-based shortcuts that I can run in Safari. And I'm doing this because I like the approach of everything is tidy and organized and it makes sense. It's a menu that I create. But also, I'm compensating for a bug of Shortcuts 2.0 that I hope will be fixed in version 2.1. But basically, Shortcuts can sync shortcuts with iCloud.
Right.
But it can also sync the shortcut order between devices. But that feature is completely broken for me. And I know that it's also broken for other people.
Yeah, it's broken for me too.
Yeah, so every time I make a change on one device, the order of my shortcuts gets completely randomized on the other. And so it's been impossible for me to keep track, because when it comes to the shortcuts extension, especially, I'm a very visual person. I know, at least with workflow, I used to know in which spot of the share sheet each workflow was. But with this bug, it's become impossible for me to keep track of where my shortcuts are. And so these groups help. So I wanted to give you an example of one of my groups, the top one that is called just extensions. This contains all of the shortcuts that I run primarily from Safari, but also from other apps. For example, I have a shortcut to save an interesting link to our Trello board for Mac Stories Weekly. I have a shortcut that I'm going to share. Like all these other examples that can be shared with our listeners, it will be available at macstories.net/shortcuts, which is our shortcut archive. The second one allows me to create a reminder for a web page that I'm looking at in Safari. I have another shortcut to create drafts for an article that I'm reading and that I want to link on Mac Stories. It will extract the selection from the web page, make a block quote out of that, and send a markdown version of the quoted selection to Draft 5.
Mm-hmm.
There's a shortcut to save the selection from Safari as a markdown block of text in the system clipboard. So you can select something on a Safari web page, even if it's rich text, and you will end up with a markdown version in your clipboard. I have this other shortcut that is called zip and share, which I use all the time. So iOS, for some reason, still doesn't have a native archive functionality to create zip archives.
Right.
And this shortcut allows me to share multiple files at once with the share sheet, and it creates an archive containing those files. And the archive, I can set a name for it, and I can share it with extensions. So, for example, imagine that I'm in the Files app, and I can select, 4 PDF documents. I can zip them up, set a name for the zip archive, and share the zip archive with the Spark email app, for example. So that's very convenient. And this is one of the recent ones that I updated for the Shortcuts archive. It's called Twitter Apps, and it sort of mimics what Opener can do, but it's done manually in Shortcuts. So given a twitter.com link, this shortcut asks me, do you want to see this tweet in Tweetbot, in Twitterific, or in the Twitter app? And I can choose the option that I want, and it takes me there. So it works for Twitter profiles as well as for individual tweets. So
oh, that's nice. Let me ask you about one of these other ones in here, which is Keep It menu. What are you using that for? Because Keep It has a pretty good share extension already.
Yeah, it does. This one is like a supercharged version of the Keep It extension.
Okay.
Among the things that it can do, it can save web archives. So offline copies of the page that are not PDF documents, but they actually look like the original web page, and all the links are tappable and the text is selectable. This is actually based on a funny, I don't want to say hack, but funny workaround. If you take a look at I'm probably going to share, I think I shared this one on ClubMax Stories, I need to check. But it basically forces the Shortcuts content graph engine to export a web archive, which otherwise is not natively supported.
Right. I think you did share that somewhere. I remember reading that.
Can also save multiple images at once. It can save PDF documents. It can take you back to the Shortcuts app after you're done basically saving a file and keep it. It's like, it doesn't do, besides web archives, it doesn't do anything extra special, but it's got those couple of enhancements that, for X callback and automation,
right,
they come in handy often.
Well, and also if this is your most used list and that's one of your most used apps, it makes sense to have it in there, even if it doesn't do a lot more than the basic share extension, I suppose, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this approach I've been testing for just a few days at this point of these extension groups, but I think at least until Apple fixes the sync order bug, I think I'm going to stick with this approach.
Yeah, that bug is really bad. And I did what you had suggested, which is I just turned off the sync order thing because it was driving me bananas where I had to use search all the time because everything was constantly scrambled.
Yeah.
Okay, let me dive into my second one. So my next step was to try to salvage Netatmo's weather station reputation after we found out, recently that it doesn't work any longer with Weather Underground. So there wasn't a reason for you to ever get one. Then I thought, well, one reason for Federico to get this is if he can use it with shortcuts. And I'm just trying to spend your money as best I possibly can, Federico. And it has its own web API, and you can. It's a little more involved because you have to actually, air quotes, apply to be a Netatmo developer. It really doesn't. I don't think no one's actually looking at it. You just give them some information about yourself and you get some keys. And then you can ping your own device and get back all sorts of information. And now the way the Netatmo weather station works is that there's an indoor component and an outdoor component. And the indoor one measures indoor temperature, humidity, and air quality. And the outdoor one measures temperature and humidity. So I created a shortcut that first authorizes me to access my weather station. And then I get the JSON back, and it's a data dump that's really complicated. It's multiple levels of JSON with all sorts of information about the weather station's serial number and the firmware type and all kinds of things you don't want. And I just went through the exercise of figuring out how to get to the bits that I wanted, and created a shortcut that uses the show results action at the end, just to have Siri speak to me or get it written out on the phone, showing me what the indoor and outdoor temperature and humidity is, which is kind of nice because it's literally the temperature right outside my back door, and it's the temperature right in my kitchen. So I like having that now. I don't feel as bad about not having the Weather Underground bit about it. I'm not able to share it with other people, but I do have my own weather data now.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. I'm kind of jealous of that approach. I keep saying this, but I should keep looking into weather stations.
And think about it. You could even hook this up to IFTTT and create like a Google spreadsheet and put all of your weather data in there. I don't know what you would do with this, Federico, but you could make charts and graphs and do all kinds of stuff once you have all these numbers.
We'll see. Speaking of weather, my next shortcut requires the Shortcuts 2.1 beta. So if you're listening to this episode that you're not on the beta, I don't know, bookmark this portion and come back when Shortcuts 2.1 launches, because you will be able to install this shortcut. I created a custom shortcut using the new weather actions of Shortcuts 2.1. It's called Weather Report, and it uses the native weather integration to show me a list of weather forecasts for today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and also there's two options for this Saturday and this Sunday. So two options to see what the weather is going to be like on the weekend, basically.
Right.
What is nice about this is that it uses the native get weather forecast action, and it uses the street address action. Because what I realized when I was spending time with the Shortcuts 2.1 beta is that if you don't use a street address, if you just use the current location, every time you run the shortcut, you will need to get your location via GPS.
And it shifts around sometimes, doesn't it?
And it shifts around, but also it takes a few seconds.
That's true.
Instead, if you just pass an address, you will get an instant weather forecast, because it's
interesting.
It's just looking up the information via the web, I think. It doesn't need to ping your iPhone sensors to get that information.
Right.
So the fact that you can choose from a list of days, basically, was the trickiest thing to put together. I'm using a dictionary and I'm calculating the time between dates. I'm pretty happy with the result, honestly. And at the end, you get this summary message that reads something like, let me try this one. Saturday, October 20. The weather is expected to be 27 degrees Celsius and clear. A high of 27 and low of 13. Other info. There is a 10% chance of rain. Sunrise at 7:26 a.m. Sunset at 6:21 p.m. So it gets these essential bits of information from the weather forecast, which contains a lot of info.
Yeah, that's nice.
This is a new type of shortcut. Yeah, it's a new type of shortcut that directly integrates with the weather app on iOS. And you can get all kinds of details from the weather forecast. I'm just looking now, for example, you could get things like the location, the temperature, the feels like, the condition, visibility, the dew point, which I never understood what it stands for.
Right.
Humidity, pressure, all kinds of information. I just wanted the essential bits. And also, you can use this in shortcuts in the app, or you can use it in the widget. So, as you can imagine, Weather Report is now an option in my utilities launcher in the widget.
Right. Oh, I would like to. This sounds like something I should combine with what I'm doing with my, really hyper local weather, because I'm only getting the temperature and humidity with that, and I could combine that with things like sunrise and sunset, and just kind of pull from different data sources and create my own customized weather report.
Yeah, I kind of love how, I don't want to say this is necessarily the approach they are taking, but from the outside, it sure looks like Apple with Shortcuts 2.1 has taken a look at the popular third-party shortcuts. So things like pcalc conversions and weather forecasts from Carrot Weather, and are making those native actions. So with measurement actions and with weather actions in Shortcuts 2.1. it looks like there's going to be people will be able to just use the native actions instead of installing a third-party app from the store.
It's a whole new category of Sherlocking.
Oh yes, totally.
Right? Sherlocking people's shortcuts.
Shortcuts locking.
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
I don't know. I'm bad
Good
at
luck
puns.
trying to say that.
It's terrible.
All right. So the next one I want to mention is, I know you have done things like this, but I had never dived into it. And I have a Harmony Hub remote, which I know you have too. And I set that up because it works with IFTTT. I use your webhooks article, which we'll link in the show notes, to set up IFTTT. So I just ask Siri to turn on my TV, and it turns on the TV, turns on the Apple TV, gets the inputs all correct, and I'm ready to go, which is fantastic. And then I do another shortcut to turn it all off again, which I really like. But then I did a third shortcut, which is movie time. And when I tell Siri it's movie time, it also dims the lights and makes sure that the lights in the front room right next to where we watch TV are off too. So it's that one has, a couple of Hue actions, or maybe they're HomeKit actions. I think they're HomeKit actions, as well as these IFTTT webhooks things, which were really easy to set up. And what I like so much about webhooks is that it allows me to extend Siri functionality and shortcuts functionality to things that wouldn't otherwise integrate with it. The only thing I'm using in my house right now that I can't do something like that with, whether it's through a web API like I've done with the Netatmo weather station, or IFTTT and webhooks with the Harmony remote, is I have Canary video cameras, and they don't have a web API, and they don't have any integration with IFTTT or anything else. I suppose maybe Homebridge might be a solution there, but I haven't gone down that path yet.
The next shortcut is a simple one, but very effective. It's a shortcut to back up your shortcuts. So
okay,
there's an action called get shortcuts that basically returns a collection of files for every single shortcut that you have installed in the Shortcuts app. These files have a .shortcut file extension.
Right.
And what you can do is you can use this action, combine it with make archive, and maybe use a timestamp as the file name, and save the result to iCloud Drive. So with 2 seconds, you will be creating a zip archive with a backup of all of your shortcuts. And in case things go horribly wrong with iCloud Sync, or if you just want to manually install your shortcuts, you can just extract them and reopen all of these files in the Shortcuts app. I run this shortcut at least once a week, just to make sure that I have an additional backup layer of my iCloud synced shortcuts. It makes me feel more relaxed in using the app so extensively.
Thanks to FreshBooks for supporting App Stories this week. When you're a freelancer, you're in charge of making smart decisions about your business. Our friends at FreshBooks can save you up to 192 hours with their cloud accounting software for freelancers that's ridiculously easy to use. By simplifying tasks like invoicing, tracking expenses, and getting paid online, FreshBooks has dramatically reduced the time it takes for over 10 million people to deal with their paperwork. I want to go over a couple of cool features that FreshBooks offers. The first is its notification center. It's like your personal assistant. When you log into your FreshBooks dashboard, you'll see a bell in the left side that indicates whether you have any notifications. Click on it and find out what's happened since you last logged in. Everything from notifications that an invoice is due, to client comments on a project, and even that employee who has accepted an invitation to a project are all there helping you keep on top of every aspect of your business and what needs your attention. Second of all, let's talk about invoice reminders. FreshBooks can do invoice follow-up for you. You send the invoice with FreshBooks, and then it can send out automatic reminders if you don't get paid on time. That eliminates the need for you to set calendar reminders for yourself to set aside time to chase late payments. Instead, let FreshBooks do the hard work, and you get back to what's important, running your business and making things. FreshBooks is offering an unrestricted 30-day free trial for listeners of this show. No credit card is required. All you have to do is go to freshbooks.com/app stories and enter app stories in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Again, that's freshbooks.com/app stories and enter app stories in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Thanks again to FreshBooks for supporting the show.
Also, allow me to mention another easy one. If you use GoodTask, the reminders client that we covered a while back on App Stories,
Right.
you know that GoodTask offers a collection of Siri shortcuts to view any list of the app, whether it's a reminders list or a smart list that you created. You can view the contents of a list in Siri. But also, this means you can view the list from other places in iOS 12, including search and shortcuts. So, of course, I made a shortcut launcher that opens the Shortcuts app and shows me different GoodTask intents, different GoodTask shortcuts visually. So, for example, in the widget, I tap on, it's called GoodTask Views. There's a list that says today, upcoming, podcasts, and family. If I tap on upcoming, it launches the Shortcuts app and it loads up a native GoodTask shortcut showing my upcoming list for tasks that are due in the next 3 days. And you can do this, you can follow this approach with any iOS 12 app that offers a native visual shortcuts intent. You can show these intents in the Shortcuts app. Unfortunately, you cannot display them in the widget. That's why my shortcut needs to open the Shortcuts app and then continue there. In the future, I hope that Apple makes it possible for shortcuts to show you custom UIs inside the widget. But for now, you will need to launch the Shortcuts app.
That is very interesting. You know, with your backup ones, that reminds me of one thing that I want so badly for shortcuts, which is firing off shortcuts based on the time of day, you know, timers that actually let you automate the process of running them as opposed to having to go in and run them yourself. That and geofencing too, but you know, that's a whole, you can kind of fake that a little bit with like Launch Center Pro and apps like that, but that would be kind of cool to be able to do. You know, drive up to your house, the lights come on and music starts playing and the heat turns up or something like that would be pretty neat.
Yeah.
But you can't do that yet. All right. The last one I'm going to mention today is my morning routine. And everybody, I think, has some sort of morning routine shortcut at this point. And you have, you published one as part of your iOS 12 review. And that was in part a starting place for my own. And it's really just a conglomeration of other shortcuts that I've got on my system. And so I threw that electricity price one in there because why not? It's the beginning of the day and I can see if electricity is really cheap, maybe I should go throw the laundry in. And I added weather, both from Carrot to get broader weather data and my local Netatmo weather. I have events, which looks at the calendar and sees what I've got coming up that day. And that part of it is based on your morning routine shortcut. And then I've got the headlines, which again is also based on yours, which goes out and it reads like, I think I've got mine set for like the 5 most recent headlines from 9 to 5 Mac, just to see if there was any overnight news in the Apple world. And then finally, I have it show me any reminders that are due on that particular day, which I don't use reminders a lot yet, but I do use it for things that I have to do at a particular time. If I want to be reminded at a particular time during the day to do a thing, I'll put it in reminders a lot of the time. And it's nice to be able to kind of see a list of all of those at the beginning of the day.
All right, final one from me. Let's see, I'm going through my list, and this is an obvious one, but I think it fixes a real problem. File downloader. So you can download files on iOS using Safari, but it's a terrible design. It's a terrible process. So this shortcut, it works by showing you an alert. The alert contains any link that you copied in the system clipboard. So say that you have a link to an MP3 file or a zip archive that you need to download. You can copy that link, run this shortcut, and it'll show you the link, and it'll say, do you want to download this file? And if you tap OK, the file will be downloaded using the get contents of URL action, and then it will just be saved to iCloud Drive. By default, it uses the save file action, You can choose where to save it. And here's a quick teachy tip. I created in my iCloud Drive a top-level folder called asterisk temp files. Temp stands for temporary. The asterisk makes sure that it's the first folder that I see in my list of folders, and it's basically like a temporary folder where I store all kinds of stuff that needs to be deleted soon. So it's a temporary parking spot for downloads, for PDF documents that I need to file somewhere else. So usually when I run File Downloader, I just save the file into the temp files folder, and then later when I have time, I go in there and I move the file somewhere else. Still,
you've recreated the downloads folder on the Mac, basically.
Yes, that was the idea.
and unlike me, who would probably just leave 1,000 files in there, you actually, I'm sure, do go in there and clean it out every now and then.
Yeah, because I hate having folders with that kind of stuff. But yeah, file downloads fixed with 3 actions in shortcuts.
No, that's fantastic. Well, I feel like we've only just kind of scratched the surface, but this is kind of this sort of topic that we can come back to again and again. And I think we'll give it a little break and move on to something else next week. But I think we've got a lot of useful shortcuts here for people to try out and maybe adapt to their own needs. And we'll make sure that these are all on macstories.net/shortcuts. And we'll have, links to everything in the show notes as well. I want to thank our sponsors again for today. We have Luna Display and FreshBooks for making this show possible. And you can always find me and Federico writing over at macstories.net. Federico is on Twitter too. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.